Welcome back. It is Bible Scribe. Thank you guys yet again for joining me. George Washington's vision. Was it a fact? Was it myth? Or is it just what America needs to hear right now? Now, before you tune out, if you've already heard of George Washington's vision, we are going to go pretty deep today with this, and we will find some information out about this writing, this vision that is recounted for us that you have not found. I promise you have not seen this anywhere on the internet. It took me hours of research to get this information together. And those out there who have said to have debunked this thing, I have found to be wrong based on the evidence. So we're going to find that out towards the end of this video. Let me pull up my outline so you can see kind of where we're going to go here. Get that up for you. So we're going to look first at some background, then we're going to take a look at the vision itself and read through just portions of it, highlighted sections. Then we're going to question whether it has been debunked or not. We will read a few things from people online that say they have debunked it, but then we are in the end going to look at the evidence for what is behind this story. And so I think that those parts, if you have heard about the vision before, but you think it's not probably true, you need to stick around and watch the third and fourth sections of this video, because there's some information that I found digging way deep, way back in history, that does shine some light on some things and is a little deeper than even some of the experts have gone that I've noticed online with this thing. So let's get started real quick. Just a little background on Washington's vision. It is a narrative presented as the 1859 reminiscence of a 99-year-old man named Anthony Sherman, who was said to have been in the Revolutionary War, present with George Washington's army at Valley Forge in the winter of 1777. And so this story is his retelling of Washington's telling of his own vision in the night or in the evening one day at Valley Forge in the winter of 1777 or 78. And so this story was claimed to have been overheard there at Valley Forge by this old man who was probably close to death at the time he recounted it. He gave this recounting to a writer named Wesley Bradshaw, or at least that was the pen name of the man who published it. He did a lot of writing, but his pen name Bradshaw was for his real name was Charles Wesley Alexander, and he was a writer, Philadelphia publisher in the 1800s, particularly in the time of the Civil War. He wrote periodicals and books for the soldiers during the Civil War, from the period of 1860-ish to 1865, which was the Civil War period. And then this little paragraph here is a kind of header piece that goes on a lot of the publications of this story that we will see throughout history. Now we're going to go way back, and we're going to see some from before when this is given. But this is one of those that says this was printed in the U.S. War Veterans paper, the National Tribune, in December of 1880. And that is true. It was also reprinted in the 1950s, but we're going to see that it has been reprinted since the time of the Civil War many countless times. But I'm going to take you back to the earliest, way earlier than 1880, so you've got to stick to the end of this to see that evidence. A copy of this account is stored in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., as many things are, fiction and nonfiction. And the Journal of American Society for Psychical Research, and this source I'm only pulling because it was on one of the Debunkers sources that I saw, that it noted about the vision and another writing by Bradshaw that they were widely copied by the press, which is true, and they were commended by the Honorable Edward Everett as a teaching that was a highly important lesson for every true lover of his country, every American. So those little tidbits, I'm going to start with that, but then now we're going to go into actually looking at the vision itself. Now, just to give you a little, mood setting, this is the most famous painting here of Washington at Valley Forge. It was a very terrible winter for the soldiers. They were hurting, they were cold. It was all they could do to stay warm, and you can see it was like this picture shows, and also like this. A very, very cold, snowy winter. They kept warm by fires and kept their spirits up with music as best they could, but Valley Forge was a very tough time for those soldiers. And remember, if you will, that Valley Forge, that winter, was between the Battle of Saratoga, which was in October of 1777, these two major battles, the Battle of Saratoga, and then the Battle of Monmouth, which was in, I believe, June of 1778. So this time at Valley Forge was between those two major battles that we are talking. And that's going to come into play later on when we get into our evidence as well for this man named Anthony Sherman, who is mentioned in this story. And there is just a quick picture of the actual Valley Forge as of today. I have not been there. After doing all this research, definitely want to go see this place. But it is just like the pictures, and this is the area where those soldiers stayed during that winter. So to get into this vision, this is a printed version of it. Now, when we get to the evidence portion of this, you're going to see that I found many versions of this, not very different, but what I mean is many reprintings of this same story, and some contain all the aspects of what you're going to see here. Some contain most of them with some omissions, etc., etc. But for now, let's read through some of this vision. Let's start with, up at the top, this intro, and this is on many of the publications of this story. The last time I ever saw Anthony Sherman, and this is William Bradshaw, or Wesley Bradshaw writing, it says, the last time he saw Anthony Sherman was the 4th of July, 1859 in Independence Square. He was then 99 years old. His dimming eyes rekindled as he gazed upon Independence Hall and wanted to tell an incident of Washington's life that no one knows except for myself, he says. So this is interesting. This is the setup for this story, this vision. Now, don't take those years and that age yet and try to do math with it. We're going to do that later on, so try right now to just enjoy the story of what happens in this vision of George Washington's. So I just wanted to note here that the setting is spoken of as Valley Forge, where Washington resolved to pass the winter of 1777 with the troops. And then it gets into the telling. It says that he was in the camp and came out one afternoon with tears in his eyes and a pale face, and then he told the soldiers next to him this vision. And he says, I was sitting at this table engaged in a dispatch, and something disturbed me, and I looked up and beheld standing opposite me a beautiful female figure. He goes on and says, I felt strange sensations spreading through me. My tongue had become useless. It had become paralyzed. So this was obviously a spiritual experience. It was, as if he was before an angel, because a lot of people record and report that kind of feeling and a paralysis and different sensations like that when they're in the presence of an angel or a spirit. And the angel starts speaking to him, and the room fades away from his view, and the angel starts talking to him, and he hears this voice. It says, Son of the Republic, look and learn. And it said, before him lay spread out in one vast plain all the countries of the world, Europe, Asia, Africa, America, like a map. I saw rolling and tossing between Europe and America the billows of the Atlantic, and between Asia and America lay the Pacific. So he saw the whole thing laid out with the oceans and all the continents. It says, Son of the Republic, look and learn. And at that moment I beheld a dark, shadowy being, like an angel, standing or floating in midair between Europe and America. Dipping water out of the ocean in the hollow of each hand, he sprinkled some upon America with his right hand, while with his left he cast some on Europe. Immediately a cloud raised from these countries and joined in mid-ocean. For a while it remained stationary and then moved slowly westward until it enveloped America in its murky folds. Sharp flashes of lightning gleamed through it at intervals, and I heard smothered groans and cries of the American people. Now, people that have studied this, including myself, see this first part of the vision as a vision of the Revolutionary War, which was in the 1770s. And look what it says. It says that this angel picks up water between Europe and America and sprinkles it over America, and that's when this chaos ensues, including chaos with the country of Europe. So this is definitely seen as a reference in this vision to the Revolutionary War, the first war in America. So continuing on after that, it says, Son of the Republic, look and learn. I cast my eyes upon America, and I beheld villages and towns and cities springing up one after another until the whole land from the Atlantic to the Pacific was dotted with them. Now, if we think about what happened after the Revolutionary War, that was part of an industrial boom and a colonization of the entire country, right? There were cities built and grown and homesteads built all over the country at that time. Before, during the Civil War, only about half the country was really populated, right? And so this is talking about the growth of America between the Revolutionary and the Civil War. But then there's another part of the vision, a second part. It says, Son of the Republic, look and learn. The end of the century cometh. At this, the dark, shadowy angel turned his face southward, and from Africa I saw an ill-omened specter approach our land. It flitted slowly over every town and city of the latter. The inhabitants presently set themselves in battle array against each other. As I continued looking, I saw a bright angel on whose brow rested a crown of light, on which was traced the word Union, bearing the American flag, which he placed between the divided nation, and said, Remember ye are brethren. And instantly inhabitants, casting from them their weapons, became friends once more and united around the national standard. So again, the students of this prophecy see this as a very specific reference to the Civil War, because what came out of Africa? Well, it was the slave trade, and it had crept into our country to such a point that we did have a divide over it. There was a civil war fought, and that was a big part of it. And so this is definitely seen as the Civil War, and the separating, it says here, the array of battle against one another. It was inside our country. And you'll notice in this vision, all the wars mentioned are wars on our own soil. All right? So this happens, and then he says, but then the angel puts the standard of America, the American flag, between the divided nation, and it heals once again, and we become brethren again. And that happened, of course, the end of the Civil War, and our nation was healed. But then there's a third part of this vision, and here it is. Son of the Republic, look and learn. At this, the dark, shadowy angel placed a trumpet to his mouth and blew 3 distinct blasts. And taking water from the ocean, he sprinkled it upon Europe, Asia, and Africa. Europe, Asia, and Africa. Then my eyes beheld a fearful scene. From each of these countries arose thick, black clouds that were soon joined into one. Throughout this mass there gleamed a dark red light, by which I saw hordes of armed men who, moving with the cloud, marched by land and sailed by sea to America. Our country was enveloped in this volume of cloud, and I saw these vast armies devastate the whole country and burn the villages, towns, and cities that I beheld springing up. As my ears listened to the thundering of the cannon, clashing of the sword, and shouts of the cries of millions in mortal combat, I heard again the mysterious voice saying, Son of the Republic, look and learn. So just realize that this third vision, and I do truly think that, approaching this vision, this whole story as prophecy, giving it first the benefit of the doubt and thinking about it as it is. This third vision seems like it's something that has not happened yet, right? There is people from Europe, Asia, and Africa all in America and all causing chaos throughout all the cities of America. And it already talked about the westward expansion of America. So you know this is the whole country, and it's all the cities and villages and towns. And it says these vast armies try to devastate the whole country, and that there's fighting all over and fires. And he sees thick black clouds and a dark red light. Well, I hate to say it, but that's a lot of what I see right now, and you may see as you look at what's going on in our country. We have riots in the streets in most major cities right now, and have for the past week or two. And we have a lot of people bearing a standard, a flag that includes red and white symbolism, or excuse me, red and black symbolism, just like the dark black clouds and the dark red light of this horde of armed men in the vision. And so I just want to bring this to your attention. This to me is very profound, very striking. This actually sounds like it could have been referring to the time we are in right now. And so it's distressing, but there is hope. There is hope at the end of this vision. So what happens after this final conflict where these people from these other nations are in our country causing chaos in all the cities? It says, Son of the Republic, look and learn. The dark shadowy angel placed his trumpet once more to his mouth and blew a long fearful blast. Instantly a light as of 1,000 suns shone down from above me, and pierced and broke into fragments the dark cloud which enveloped America. At the same moment the angel upon whose head still shone the word Union, and bore our national flag in one hand and a sword in the other, descended from the heavens, attended by legions of white spirits. These immediately joined the inhabitants of America, who I perceived were nigh overcome, but immediately, taking courage again, closed up their broken ranks and renewed the battle. Awesome. So it's saying that and in an instant, as the Americans are fighting to take their country back, light breaks in, and essentially God steps in. And light shines in through the darkness and breaks into fragments the cloud that envelops our country. And it says that the angels come down to also join us in this battle, and then we are victorious. America is victorious in the end of this. And immediately taking courage, we broke up their ranks and renewed our battle. And then at the end it says here, Son of the Republic, look and learn. As the voice ceased, the shadowy angel for the last time dipped water from the ocean, sprinkled it upon America, and instantly the dark cloud rolled back, together with the armies it had brought, leaving the inhabitants of the land victorious. And doesn't it feel right now like in America there is a dark cloud hovering that we are trying so hard to get rid of? I don't care where you stand politically, but there is a darkness, a binding that we have to get loosed. And it sounds so similar to this in this vision. It's so striking. And I have known about this vision and this story for a long time and kept it with me just in the back of my head, thinking about it, as time has gone on. And because it now feels like this is a parallel to what's going on in our country right now with this third part of the vision, another chaos battle on American soil that we have to get through. I wanted to bring this in this video. But then at the end of this whole vision, after we have conquered in these three battles, Revolutionary War, this Civil War, and this final conflict, it does say this. The angel says to George Washington, while the stars remain and the heavens send down dew upon the earth, so long shall the Union last. Meaning America will last until this earth is through. And so that is a lot of hope. That is a lot of hope to be given. Especially if you feel somewhat like I do that this possibly may be referring to real conflicts and real things that have happened throughout our history. And it's quite possible. Now, don't let your skepticism dive right in just yet. Keep it at bay, because we're going to look at some very interesting things about this story in just a minute. The angel finalizes this by saying to George Washington, The three great perils will come upon this republic. The most fearful is the third, but it's the greatest conflict, and in it the whole world united will not prevail against you. Let every child of the republic learn to live for his God and his land and the Union. What a great statement. And it's just, it does your heart good to think about this. And so coming to this vision and this story just with an open mind, it's a very encouraging story for our country. If in fact it actually does refer to our history as a country. So now we've gone through this vision. Now we didn't read every word. I encourage you to do that on your own. But now we're going to go into some of the arguments against the validity of this story we just read. And I found, as I looked at these arguments, just to ruin the end before we get there, I found that they didn't hold water when scrutinized against the evidence that's out there. So I'm going to look through that evidence. The rest of this video may get a little lengthy, but if you like genealogy, if you like history, historical documents, and digging into stuff, then that's for you, and we're going to do that next. So let me start into some of that. Bring back my notes here. So just in the sense of debunked, when I looked at this, I did pull up two websites that try to debunk this. And I'm sure there's more out there, but these are the main arguments against this vision we just read and against the validity of it. These two websites, Snopes.com, you've probably heard of. It is a CIA-backed fact-checking site. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't like it at all, and I don't find a lot of helpful things on Snopes, so I don't use it. But they were one of the sources that tries to debunk this vision. And then I saw this other site, ProfessorBuzzkill.com, that just had some of the normal arguments against it. So I noted these here. Let's read through these arguments real quick so then we know what we're finding evidence against. Professor Buzzkill says, there's no evidence of Washington reporting such a vision to an officer at Valley Forge at the time. That's true. There's no other articles or writings from the 1770s that say that George Washington said this to anyone in Valley Forge in the winter of 1777. But maybe this is the document. So it's kind of a silly statement to make. It's not really a good argument at all. It's just a statement of opinion, really. That just because we don't have any other documents besides this one that mention this specific thing that was apparently said as alleged by the vision itself to only a couple or select people, it's doubtful that we would have gotten anything written about it. But there's this one vision writing that has been put down, and it was from the memory of a soldier who was there. We're going to look into that. Snopes.com says this, although an officer named Anthony Sherman did serve in the Continental Army, he was at Saratoga under the command of Benedict Arnold at the end of 1777, and therefore wasn't with Washington's forces at Valley Forge during the winter of 1777 and 78. Well, on face value, if you don't know anything about the Battle of Saratoga and the winter of 77, 78, and then the Battle of Monmouth in the spring of 78, then this statement seems to have some validity, but we're going to find out that it really doesn't at all, because there's plenty of records of people, different regiments and brigades that were at the Battle of Saratoga, spending the winter with Washington in Valley Forge, and then being a part of the battle with Washington in Monmouth in June the next year. So that's a historical fact. And for Snopes to say this and make you think that it couldn't have happened is disingenuous, to say the least. And I would just say they're wrong, completely wrong. Professor Buzzkill again then says, military pension records indicate that Sherman died in 1840. Well, we're going to actually be able to check this fact out, because we're going to look at the actual pension records of Anthony Sherman, and we're going to see if they say that he died in 1840 for ourselves. And then finally, Snopes does say this also. During the war, Alexander, and this is Alexander, the real name of the Wesley Bradshaw who wrote this in the periodical at the time of the Civil War. It says, during the war, he penned several similar tracts featuring both historical and contemporary American figures, Lincoln, Davis, and Grant, including General McClellan's dream. Now, Snopes says this in this way to make you feel like, because he wrote something called General McClellan's dream, that all of his writings were fictitious and made up stories about dreams and visions and things like that. But that's absolutely not true. It's just the way they word it very sneakily to make you feel that way. And yes, Alexander wrote a lot of tracts and things for the soldiers in the war, and during that time he wrote things, mostly books, small books, of which I found a bunch on the internet. But this really doesn't give this doesn't give you any evidence that this particular writing was either falsified or incorrect or fictitious. This doesn't really have anything to do with that. So again, Snopes being a little disingenuous here, and it's not appreciated. So now that we've seen what kind of the debunkings are on this, and they don't, of course, give you a lot of evidence. You can go and read their articles if you want. But we're going to start asking the questions. Was there a real Anthony Sherman? So I started hitting up sites and tried to find Anthony Sherman. So I actually did find some information on Anthony Sherman at Ancestry.com and at findagrave.com. So let me show you that real quick. Here is the site for Find a Grave. Let me pull it into view so you can see. This is a record for Anthony Sherman, recorded by somebody, because I think you can submit things to this site, and generally they are tied to a gravestone, but this one doesn't have a picture. So someone put Anthony Sherman in with the birth date of the 21st of May, 1753, Pennsylvania, and his death unknown. And it does give interesting information that he had a spouse, Eula Thomas, and was married at about 1778, which would have been just after he came out of the war, the Revolutionary War. And we're going to see I think there's another record of that marriage that we're going to find that states that it could have been 1775 when he got married, just before the war. Irregardless, there's at least a couple references that this was his wife, Eula Thomas, and he had a twin brother named Amos. And you can see here someone's put in family members, his father and mother, Daniel Sherman and Elizabeth Scott, and his siblings, and there's Amos listed there, and a bunch of others. And so this is interesting, but as I dug, these weren't tied to anything. So this is just a record that someone put in findagrave.com with our guy. Now, where they got their information, we don't know yet. And so we're just going to hold on to that and see it as a piece of information. Hopefully is helpful. Now here on Family Search, or it's the same thing generally as Ancestry.com, but here is an Anthony Sherman. And now this one is 13th of September, 1752, deceased. And we see here that the place of birth mentioned is Swansea in Bristol, Massachusetts. And we are going to see this location of birth in some documents and some other things. So we will start getting a clue that this is actually this man's place of birth, and that this date, 13th September 1752, might be pretty dang close. And is on some official documents. And again, here is some information on relatives, but we're not going to get too detailed into that, because it's not going to help us much determining like if Anthony Sherman was real, and if he was in the Revolutionary War, and if he could have been this person that was legitimately spoken of in this vision of Washington that we just read together. So we won't go any deeper into relatives, but let's talk more about Anthony Sherman. So when I started searching on Ancestry.com, I found, and so just to note too, because of that story and what it said, it mentioned the year, actually I think it said 1859, and that he was 99 at that time. So that's kind of how I started my date searching, by the way. I just kind of pulled back like 99 years from 1859, and then as you'll see as we get into this, a few documents or reprints of this thing have the year 1851. So I also went back from that date, and that's how I started finding these documents. But I wanted to show you what's really interesting, because we mentioned that pension, and I think it was either Snopes or that other website that said that the pension records recorded that he died. And so my question would be, did he die, or did the records simply indicate that the pension stopped? Where are these records? And so I found the records, all right? I actually found the pension records for Anthony Sherman from his service in the Revolutionary War. And so we're going to look at that. Now here is, to start with, here is one of them. Now this is a application. This is Anthony Sherman. You can see, hopefully, I'll try to mark things as we go, but hopefully you can see that right here is Anthony Sherman's name written. This is the application, and they had I looked at the act of Congress that established the pensions for the Revolutionary War. I think it was in, if I'm not mistaken, like 1832, I think, is about the time that was done. And so I looked at that, but there was a long application process they had to go through. They had to verify all the records of their service in the Revolutionary War and which companies they were a part of, which brigades, when they entered, when they left, and they also had to have affidavits signed by people who could verify some of it. So it's interesting that in this group of documents on Ancestry.com, they actually have almost all of his application for the Revolutionary War pension, Anthony Sherman. And you can see this says Anthony Sherman, and I don't know if you'll be able to read it with me. I hope you can see this, but it says of Suffolk, North Carolina, or New York, Suffolk, New York, in the state of New York, right there, who was a private in the Continental Command of Captain Davis, of the regiment command by, some of this was hard to read, Livingston. This is by Colonel Livingston, and we're going to read about a Colonel Livingston in just a minute, except it may be General Livingston. I'm not sure if that's, I can't remember. We'll find out later on if he was a colonel or general, but he was in the war in Saratoga and in Valley Forge. And this is Anthony Sherman's pension application saying, I was in the company of Livingston during the war. And so we're going to actually see more record of that. In the New York line, the New York line was the name of the group in the military of the Revolution. For 15 months, he says. For 15 months. So that is what that says. This being his application for pension. And just to show you kind of how this stuff goes, it's hard to see, but I've read through this a few times, so I hopefully can guide us through. But it says here, inscribed in the roll of New York at the rate of $50 and no cents per annum. So annually he was going to get $50 pension for his service, to commence on the 4th day of March of 1831. And this was when all of those pensions started for everybody. But this one was actually, the certificate was issued the 6th day of, and I can't see that month, but it's 1835. I think it's February 1835. So he applied for the pension in February of 1835, when it had already been established. In 1832 was the act that established it, but it all was supposed to start in 1831. So they actually backpaid the Revolutionary War soldiers who applied for the pension for those past years. So he was applying for it in 1835, but it had already started as far as the pensions being paid out. So he was going to get back paid for all those years, and then for additional years based on his service. And that is what we're looking at here. So it says, see, as it says here, arrears, which means back paid to the 4th of September in 1834. And that would be $175. So $50 annually from the 1831 to 1834. Every 6 months, half of the payment would come in. And so it ends up being $175 at that point. And then semi-allowance going on forward of $25. And so that would be $200, I suppose, is this original payment that he got. So it was obviously a good thing for him to go ahead and apply for this, even though he was late, and get his pension back paid, because he'd get a big fat check for $200, which back then was a ton of money, right? So he definitely wanted to take advantage of that if he could, and that's what he did. Yep, Revolutionary Claim. The act, the Revolutionary Pension Act, was June 7th, 1832, and it's mentioned here on this certificate application. And it says who it's recorded by, and etc., etc. So that is his application. So we know that he applied for pension. We already know that he claimed to be, as it said at the top, under the command of a Captain Davis and a General Livingston. And so we're going to be looking for those names. And he said he was in service 15 months. And so we've got all these hints now. But it was awesome as I continued on, because I started finding things. So the pension law we've also already discussed. That's just more information on it. But I did find it. We just looked at it. His pension application. So we mentioned all these things. It's $50 per year. It was issued in 1835. Backdated and paid to him a sum total of $200 at once. And then had this statement on one of the pages: all claims out 15 months relinquished. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's very interesting as well. So in his pension application, now there's further pages of this thing. Now that's just the initial page, but there's actually a letter he wrote where he's recounting his whole service of the Revolutionary War. So, and just be aware too that we're going to see his name listed on some of these papers in this application. Some are affidavits from other people, and etc., etc. His name is sometimes listed as Sherman with S-H-E-R and sometimes S-H-E-A-R. So it seems the real spelling is with a E-A-R. But just to note that all these papers are of the same person, Anthony Sherman, or Sherman, however you want to say that. So we're going to start at page 183, and I'm going to show you the page real quick. But then I'm just going to kind of, so there it is. It's a handwritten page, and I've gone through this whole thing and tried to painstakingly pull out all the events and the names so that we get all the information out. Some of it's hard to read, but I do believe that I've got a very clean reading on everything that's important. So let me pop back over to my notes, and I'll tell you what's in this first page here. He says that he enlisted in the Minutemen, commanded by David Pearson, on September 15th of 1775. All right. He was in a brigade commanded by General Marshall until the spring of 1776. So then he enlisted in the Continental Army as regular under Captain John Davis, which is what we saw on his application. And he was attached to the regiment commanded by Colonel Henry B. Livingston. Now, this is Henry, and I think it's Beacom Livingston. Let me make sure I have it down here. Yeah, Beekman Livingston. There's two Henry B. Livingstons that were in the Civil War, but this is a very important colonel who was involved in the Battle of Saratoga and with George Washington directly. So it's important that we know this is Colonel Henry Beekman Livingston, not the other guy that I found online who wasn't related to this at all. In General George Clinton's brigade, he was stationed at Montauk on Long Island. He was a supporter and friend of George Washington, and he supplied, this is speaking of George Clinton, he was a direct supporter and friend of George Washington's. and he supplied food to the troops at Valley Forge. This was just something I found in notes. This wasn't in this document, but it's interesting to note that all these people that Anthony Sherman mentions that he was involved with during the Revolutionary War or served under were directly related to George Washington, right? So under George Clinton's brigade, George Clinton, I think later on I read he became a mayor or a governor, and in that role he was able to lend a hand and support to George Washington and his troops at Valley Forge because he was in a leadership position. So then Anthony Sherman says he was called to Connecticut with the regiment that was stationed at Stony Brook. So now moving on, that was all that was on really page 183. So we'll go on to the next handwritten letter page by Anthony Sherman. And I'm going to have all these links so you can do this work yourself. Don't think I'm just showing you random pages. This is all legitimate. I just to go through and kind of translate, find these words, but you can see right here. Let's see, where's one? So here's the name General George Clinton right here. You can see I'm not blowing smoke. This is exactly what we're reading here, and so this is the document that we're talking about. We're about to get into this section, so I won't go further there, but just to show you that George Clinton's name mentioned there. So this is the document we are talking about. Here up at the top is a mention of Captain Jacob Smith, and we're about to talk about him too in the notes. So just know that this is the document we're talking about. He was with Captain Jacob Smith on Long Island, and he went to New Haven, Connecticut, to Peekskill, New York is what I think it was. It looks like it's something skill, and I think I determined it's Peekskill, New York. He was also with General George Clinton at Fort Montgomery, and he was discharged there before he was the fort was taken by the British. And so I have a link to the Wikipedia page on that, but just to note that was what happened. But he says he was discharged before that. So that in the spring of 1777, now Valley Forge was in the winter, so this is the preceding spring. He says he served as a substitute for a man named John Griswold. And I found this on a website. I found his name on a website that lists all the soldiers that were at the Battle of Saratoga. So I know that this name, which is mentioned on the document, that he said he substituted for this soldier, was a legitimate name of a soldier at the Battle of Saratoga. And it's mentioned on that website right there. I will have this link for you. You can follow these links yourself and find the same information. Then he also served during that time as a substitute for the soldier Samuel Fuller, and he also is listed in that same website as a soldier at Saratoga under the Captain John Damon, and attached to the Northern Army under the command of General Benedict Arnold. So Benedict Arnold was the one who led the army in the Battle of Saratoga, the Northern Army. So anyway, just all the connections there are happening for Anthony Sherman. He says he was at the Battle of Saratoga when General Burgoyne, which was the opposite side, and his army were taken prisoner at the end of the battle. So he was there during that time when the battle ended. And that would have been, I think it's October of 1777 was and I don't remember the exact date, but we may see that later on. He says in the letter that he does not recollect when he was discharged at this time after the battle was over, but he re-entered service as a substitute for a man named Reuben Champion and attached to the regiment commanded by, here's this guy again, Colonel Henry Beekman Livingston. Now, again, this is a colonel who at this time and was going into the winter, he traveled and took his whole group, his regiment, to Valley Forge. It's recorded history. So this means that if Anthony Sherman was with the regiment of Colonel Henry Beekman Livingston at the time of the end of the year, 1777, he did in fact travel with them to Valley Forge at the end of the year and spent the winter there with George Washington and the soldiers. So this is the history I'm talking about. This is not refutable. This is what Livingston's regiment did. And then he was also in the Battle of Monmouth in June of 1778. So they stayed with Washington's group and his armies the whole winter and into the spring and summer. So they were there the whole time. Anthony Sherman goes on. He says he joined the regiment in New Jersey at the Battle of Monmouth, and that was June 28th in 1778 with George Washington. So he was with George Washington's armies that whole time. So the possibility that this was the man being spoken of in the vision is very high. He had the location. He was with the man, George Washington, and his armies. He was in the vicinity, in the troops. He was there. He was with George Washington at this time, the winter 77-78. And then the Battle of Monmouth, just so you know a little bit about that, is the last major battle in the northern theater of the Revolutionary War, and the first battle in which Washington fought the British and held the field by using European tactics, regardless. So Washington kind of led that charge in the Battle of Monmouth after the winter in Valley Forge, where he had recounted this vision to some soldiers, including Anthony Sherman, which we have now been reading about in this very old document from 1845? 1835? 1835. Oh my goodness. It's so awesome to me to read documents that are this old. So there's one more page of this. There's one more page now of this document with more information about the end of the war, but because it's after, we've already established that Anthony Sherman was in Valley Forge with George Washington during 1777-78, the winter in Valley Forge. So we've determined he was in the place and could be that man. There was no other Anthony Sherman listed in any of the documents I saw for, and either spelling, Sherman or Shearman, with any of the documents I saw for the Civil War, and there were a lot of them, especially for the Battle of Saratoga. They listed every soldier that there was, and there was no other man named Anthony Sherman in any of those documents. So I feel very confident this is our guy, and he was there with George Washington in Valley Forge. So this Ancestry.com document cache continues to go on, and it has document after document that's all part of that application for pension. But on this page 232, we have a letter from a man named with the last name Sherman, George R. Sherman, in the year of 1912, and he's asking for information. So let me show you that real quick, just show you the document so you know that it's legitimate like the rest. Right here it says, the Honorable Commissioner of Pensions, dear sir, in the matter of the military history of, guess who, Anthony Sherman, a soldier of the Revolutionary War who served as a Minuteman from the state of New York in Captain David Pearson's company and in the companies of Captain John Davis and John Damon, which we've already mentioned, and Captain Henry Champlin, and pensioned from April 1828 as the date of the application. So this is another interesting document, and look here at the signage on the bottom. This is signed, yours truly, by a George R. Sherman from East Providence, Rhode Island. This obviously was a relative, a grandson, or a son, who knows. But here's what the letter says. Just real briefly, I translated this, or put this whole letter down in type so we could read it easily. In the matter of military history of Anthony Sherman, a soldier of the Revolutionary War who served as a Minuteman from the state of New York in Captain David Pearson's company, also in the companies of Captain John Davis and John Damon, and Captain Henry Champlin, and pensioned from August 18th, 1828, the date of the application. Will you please inform me, a descendant, the date of the last payment of pension to him, also whether or not he left a widow and her name, providing she too drew or applied for a pension. Respectfully yours, George R. Sherman, on the 10th of August, 1912. So here's a legitimate relative looking for this man, or information about this man, Anthony Sherman, who he says was his ancestor. Very impressive, very amazing. Definitely a real person here. We're not talking about fiction anymore, people. This is the type of stuff you do when you do genealogy search, and this establishes connection between these people. So, very good information here. Then there's another letter included, page 234. We go there real quick. And this letter is from, just so you can see it here, a James L. Sherman. James L. Sherman. So, this is another relative looking for information. And these were all received by the Commissioner of Pensions. That's why they're all in this archive. This is apparently the Pension Records Archive. And so all of these are in this Ancestry.com archive together. But this letter says this. Dear Sir, will you please send me the record of Anthony Sherman, a soldier of the Revolution who was born about 1758 and died about 1849, or after 1849 in Sag Harbor, Long Island, New York. If he left a widow who drew a pension, please give her name and date and place of birth. I think he served in George Washington's staff. He, and then some of it was unreadable for me, John Peleg Lernett and Anthony Jr. I think he's mentioning children there, or his brothers and sisters. This information is for no other purpose than a part of family record. Yours with great respect, James L. Sherman, veteran of the Civil War. So this James L. Sherman, who's writing this, was actually a veteran of the Civil War, like probably his father, Anthony Sherman, before him, was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. And so they followed in his footsteps. And so James L. Sherman, writing to get the records, the last records of his father, it looks like, see, they don't even know the date of his death. So they're asking for any information, whether he had a widow who drew pension, and they're just trying to find out information. This letter being written in 1912, they weren't expecting either Anthony or his wife to be alive. They're just trying to get the information. They're trying to find out and establish their family's history. So this letter written to the Commissioner of Pensions for that purpose. Now, page 236 is a document, I think, that was sent in response to one of these requests or inquiries. And this is an information readout or listing of his service as given by the Bureau or the Commissioner of Pensions. So it says, as of September 15th, 1775, and this is all recounted in that letter, but this was their official record, so he recounts it here. He was in the Minutemen for 8 months. Then in spring of 76, he joined John Davis. And that was under the Colonel Henry B. Livingston, Beekman Livingston. Then 6 months he was under John Demon. And then 6 months under, again, Livingston, which would have been the time that he was also with Washington's regiment, his group, from 1777 to 1778. So the whole time you can see he was under Livingston's command, and all Livingston's men went to Valley Forge. Again, just reinforcing that this time frame, 77 to 78, he was with that group, with that regiment, and so he would have been there with Washington in Valley Forge. Very amazing. This all recounts the dates of the pensions. We don't need to go in there, but it does, just so you know, you see here it remarks there was no data as to family on the pension information. So apparently Anthony Sherman, when he filled out the pension stuff, he did not mention a wife or any children at that time. And it's not that he, wasn't being sneaky. It wasn't part of his application, so he probably didn't note it at all. So then going further, page 230, there's a pamphlet, a page that says all these things. Now, I'm going to show you real quick, 230. Yeah, this is just a letter. Yeah, this is a letter written in later on. So this is in the 1900s, 1934. This is a letter written by a guy that I think is looking for information on the person, Anthony Sherman, as mentioned in the vision, because he, I think, is probably a writer or connected with a publication outlet, and he's trying to figure out where the story came from, right, and find out if it's real, if it's not. But he mentions George Washington, Valley Forge, and he's trying to find out information about the Revolutionary War and this man who had drawn pensions from 1832 to 38, and this is our man, Anthony Sherman. And so he mentions him here, Anthony Sherman, born in 1752 in Swansea, Massachusetts, which is the same birthplace we saw mentioned in the other stuff. And he's talking about a recollection of an experience of George Washington's at Valley Forge. So this is definitely in regards to this vision. And this was written again in 1934. So it's just information to show that people have been trying to track this down for a long time. So information just specifically about Valley Forge. Captain John Davis, as was mentioned in Anthony Sherman's papers, was in the battle in Valley Forge, and this is mentioned in this Wikipedia article about Henry Beekman Livingston. In October 77, Livingston, now a colonel, led the 4th New York Regiment in General Horatio Gates' left-wing battle, Saratoga. Later that year, he led the regiment into winter quarters at Valley Forge. And Anthony Sherman claimed exactly that. He was in this regiment of Livingston's under a different captain, but in the regiment. All right, so they were all there. In June 1778, the 4th Regiment was placed in the main line of defense, the Battle of Monmouth, and Anthony Sherman mentioned that battle as well, that he was there. He did mention that he was a prisoner when peace was proclaimed at the Battle of Monmouth. He had been taken prisoner during the battle, I believe is what it says, and that's that third page we didn't really go into. But just to know, he mentions the battle and that he was taken prisoner, but then released after the peace was established, and so everything was over at that point. Page 185, we noted that he was born in the town of Swansea, Massachusetts. September 13th, 1752 was his own claimed date. Let me make sure that was, I think, his application. Yep, so he claims that date as his birth date, but I want you to see here, it's right here in this area that he's talking about. You see 13th September 1752, but that he has no record of this age, but believes the above statement to be true, that he came to Sag Harbor when he was about 21 years of age. So just note that even he himself did not know his birth date specifically. He thought it was 13th of September in 1752, and that he was 21 years old when he came to Sag Harbor, New York. But he's even being like, I'm not sure, I don't have a record. They didn't have like birth certificates. If you were if your birth was on the farm or, in the countryside, then you didn't have a birth certificate. Nobody knew anything other than, you hopefully counted the years correctly from when your parents counted the years correctly from when you were born to when you were old enough to understand how old you were. So that's the situation here, is sometimes these old things, you just don't know exactly. Even he didn't know specifically his exact age. He thought he knew that it was 1752, September 13th, his birthday. Very interesting. I love reading this old stuff and finding this stuff out. National Tribune in 1859, reprinted in 1880, says this, and this is the preface to the vision. So this one is the most kind of quoted and used version. It says, the last time I saw Anthony Sherman on the 4th of July, 1859, he was 99 years old and becoming very feeble. So that is the thing. And so when we take the 1859, and I'll do it right here, 1859 minus 99 years is what? Equals 1760. So that would mean at 1770 he would be what, 10 years old, right? So that seems wrong, and I did that wrong. 1777, that would be 17 years old. Okay, sorry about that. So this is a possibility because, you know, I looked up, and Revolutionary War soldiers could have been anywhere from, honestly, 15 up to 35 or 40. And so it's very possible that at the age 17, he could be in there. I think that they could be in at 15. What I read is if they had parents' permission, that they could go in at 15. But anything older than that, they could go enlist themselves. And so at 17, he could easily have enlisted himself in the Continental Army. And I note that here. The official enlistment age was 16, 15 with parental consent. But soldiers could sign up till they were 55, and the majority of them were 17 or 18 years old. So this statement from this one post in the National Tribune that's supposedly reprinted in 1880, but it was official in 1859, said that in 1859 that this Wesley Bradshaw writer saw Anthony Sherman in Independence Square on July 4th. And at 99 years old, he told him this story that he had heard from George Washington's own lips in Valley Forge almost 100 years earlier. So it's amazing, but this gives us now dates and times to be looking at, which is very interesting. Now on page 226 of this document over here, there's a very interesting thing we find out. Now this is a letter. This is one of the affidavits of a person trying to confirm Anthony Sherman's information to the Commissioner of Pensions office. And so this right here was written, let's see, usually the previous page, 1923, that's not it. This was later than that. 1912. That's possible. Anyway, this was written by a person here named something Sherman. And so this is likely a relative as well. But note what he says here. Oop, I didn't mean to mark that there. Right here in the document, we're going to read this line. It's super important. This guy is verifying that Anthony Sherman, right here, Anthony Sherman, was all the things he said he was. Sag Harbor, born about 1758, he says, or 5. I can't read that exactly. But it says he was alive on July 4th, 1849, age 91 years. All right? So this is key information, the 91 years old and the 1849 year. All right? Now, let's do our math again over here. So, here's our math. If in 1849 he was 91 years old, that takes us back to, trying to do my math, 149, 59, 1758. 1758, right? So that matches what he says there. So at 1777 at Valley Forge, he would be 19 years old, right? 58 to 78 is 20 minus 1, 19. Okay, so there's another possibility there, right? And we're going to see as we go on, there's actually a lot of different recountings of this that have just slightly different time frames here. So we're going to keep those in mind and go forward. But just know that this affidavit was a sworn document by a member of his family that said in 1849 he was 91 years old. So at the time of that other recounting, 1859, he would have been exactly 101 years old according to this guy. All right? So that's really old, obviously. So we're going to have to just make some sense of the dates that we're going to see because they vary a little bit. But we're about to get into that, and we're going to try to go a little quick because I know I'm running long here. But this stuff is so interesting to me. I know I warned you that we're going to get into some deep stuff here and really go through it. But now we're going to go down in my notes here to where I started to find some of the best, most interesting information. I did find a history of Swansea in New York that mentioned some Shermans, and I believe that these are actually, that Peleg was mentioned in his letter, his application letter for the pensions, but it was very hard to read. And so, it's just interesting information. I can't really verify that, but it seems like, that Peleg was a colonel, etc., Swansea. This is all the same stuff all together. So it does lend credence to the whole thing. Okay, this was I'm going to skip that. So now we're looking really at these publications of the vision. And so here's what I found. I went, and you can see here is starting a list of publications of where I found this vision recounted. And I'll scroll down a little because you can see as time goes on, 1850s. This is after the Civil War now. And 1859, 1871, 65. So this is after the Civil War. 1880. Now this is the National Tribune mention that I had mentioned before. That 1859, age 99. So 1898. So it goes on. And honestly, they reprinted this thing so many times. It was all the way from the 1860s during the Civil War, all the way up into like the 30s, the 1930s. You can see here the Auburn Citizen in 1917, Rockingham, North Carolina, Richmond County Journal, 1968. That was way late, right? So they recounted this thing over and over again. But so I definitely wanted to see what the earliest ones were saying. And the very earliest publication I could find online without spending actual money to dig through microfiches at libraries around the globe was 1861, this Clearfield Republican periodical, April 17th. And it has the vision, and I'll, real quickly, I'm going to just, I'll go to this one real quick so you can see what it looks like. So you can see this is the Library of Congress, and you can dig through these old newspapers, but you can see this is the Clearfield Republican right here, and I can zoom in. You can see there's Washington's Vision by Wesley Bradshaw. And there's the keywords I was searching for at the time. But you can see on the 4th of July, 1850 in Independence Square. So now our dates and our numbers. He was then 99, becoming very feeble. So our dates and numbers are coming back into play. And as I looked at this, I saw all these different ones. And this one said it was at 1850, he was 99. Then I saw the Holmes County Farmer. It said the same thing in the same year, just a month or two later. And then another one, the Lansing State Republican, same year, a month later, 1859 and 99. So the oldest one said 1850 and 99. Then it was 1859 and 99, 1859, 99, 1859, 91. In the Joliet Signal, July 9th, 1861. And then the White Cloud, Kansas Chief, 1859-99. July 11th, 1861. So you can see how this happened. It was always these numbers. I was always dealing with these dates and the number of years. How old was he at that date? Because that would help us pinpoint if this was the same guy, which at this point I'm pretty sure, we've gone through so much evidence that shows he was there. This is definitely the guy. Anthony Sherman was in the Civil War with Washington at Valley Forge, period. It's locked down. Now the question is whether this guy who wrote this thing just got the dates wrong or how he did this, because each of these different periodicals just did it a little differently. So back up here at our mathematics. I'll just separate this out so this is what we're focused on right now. So these options, now the oldest one I found was that said it was in 1850 he was 99 years old. And so that puts him born at 1759, right? Oh, excuse me. No, it's not. Minus 100, 1750 plus 1, 1751. And at 1777 then, he would be, this 71 is 20 plus 6 is 26. So 26 years old, if that was the case. And then our other possibility, some of them did say this. They said in 1859 he was 91 years old, and that would put him at 60 plus 8, right? 1768. So then this one's the one that doesn't work at all. But this was published a lot, and it was published with these numbers. So then in 1777, he would have been 9 years old, right? So that's wrong. We know this one's wrong. It's because it's impossible. Then all three of these are possible because of the age, right? He could have been any of these ages in the Revolutionary War for sure. But we do need to remember what he mentioned, and that was that he thought he was born in 1753, right? So from his own documents, Anthony's own letter, he was born in September of 1753. So the one option I thought of after I looked at all this that I didn't actually see in a published copy of this thing, but I was thinking about it because we have both Anthony's own letter and the sworn affidavit from his family member that said it said that he was, sorry, trying to make sure I get it right, don't mislead anybody. Well, there's his own writing, 1752. So I put that wrong. 1752. Oh, and here's the one. Here's the signed affidavit that said by his own family member he was alive in 1849 and was 91 years old. So now this is the information, right? All these up here are from periodicals. And then these are his own family's information. I'm just trying to organize it so we can look at it all together. That's important when you are assimilating data. You want to see all together. So when I looked at all these, there was all these misprints. And so there was 1859, 1849, and 1850. Well, what's interesting to me is that this sworn affidavit, which I am more apt to believe, was 1849 and aged 91 years. And look at what we have here. We have a lot of different publications that use those exact years as the information here. And perhaps this person who was in Anthony Sherman's family who wrote this affidavit, perhaps he was at this same July 4th event where this writer, Wesley Bradshaw, pen name, saw Anthony Sherman and got this story, because it's a lot more believable that he would have given this story at 91 years of age than 99 years of age, right? And that puts him at exactly the right time for the war and all that stuff. So, And you remember that he recounted in his own notes that he wasn't sure about his birth year and all that. So it just stands to reason that this is possibly the correct date for even the story. And what happens, we're talking about a story that says this. It says 1859, and this is quotes. They all print it like this, and then they all print the 99 as the age. They always print it with the words. Well, look at this. When you print this or write it, 91, are these not very similar in print? 91 and 99, they look very similar. And so my guess in all this stuff is that this 1859 was meant to be 1849 in the story, and it may have been originally penned that way, but when someone transcribed it or copied it or got a, how type was back then, it was not that precise, and so maybe there was a smudge on the original that went out and was published by all the newspapers, and so they couldn't read it real well, and perhaps they did the best they could and they fixed it, but some of them fixed it to 59, some said 49, they got it right, and then some said 50 because a 0 and a 9 look very similar. And so my speculation on this is that they truly just messed up when they reprinted this story. I could not find the original from Wesley Bradshaw. If we could or did find that, and perhaps it's out there, perhaps I just have to spend the money to get into the archives to see it. If we found that, I bet you that it would say that it was 1849 when he recounted this story, and that he was 91 years old at the time. And that I think that either some of them added or changed it to 99 because they couldn't read it right, or because it made more sense if they accidentally got the date wrong. If they got the date wrong and it was 1859, then 91 didn't make any sense, because then that person, as we said, he would have had to be 9 years old during the war. So I think this is just a mistake of printing. And the reality is, that, as we have shown in our research here, that Anthony Sherman was 100% real. He was in the war. He was in all the right places that would have put him right beside George Washington in Valley Forge in 1777 in the winter. Man, this was so exciting and fun, and I think for our country right now, this information is important, because if you take that vision and you read it, to me something rings true about that, and we are in a time of darkness right now. I wanted to bring this video because we need a little hope, and even without this, I think we have hope, because I think America is strong, and what we stand for, the liberty of the individual, and the power of the people to rule themselves and to keep our government in check to where it is doing what it's supposed to do is still strong in the American people. And I think that we will retake the country in a way that is constructive and good and will take us far into the future. But I wanted to give this message of hope right now when things can look so bleak, and we have riots in our streets, and we have people doing silly, stupid things. I pray for our country. You should pray for our country and for what's going on right now. Pray for our leaders, that they make wise decisions, and that those who are corrupt are exposed and driven out of our country. And I thank God for you. Thank you for sticking with me this long. I hope this has been inspiring and encouraging for you. God bless.